Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me again. In the last video, we were able to get our React app set up with Webpack. And in this video, we're not going to do anything that's React specific, but we are going to make sure that we can add CSS styles and images to our project. Also, we're going to look at a simple deployment using Netlify. So first, take a look at my file, or my project, as I have updated it. Just a second here. All right, so what I did was first I created a folder in the source directory called pages, and in that folder I moved, or to that folder I moved my home.js file. This isn't necessary, it's just something that I like to do to keep my projects well organized. I keep my component pages in a pages directory, and I keep my normal components, my normal React components in a components directory. So you'll have to change your import statement in your index.js file if you're following along. You'll have to add that pages folder to your path. Also, another thing I've done is I've added an assets folder to my source directory, and in that assets folder I've added an image. Right, it's just basically the Webpack icon, right, because I want to try to use images in my project today. All right, everything else should be working as it was before. Remember, when I run my build command, then Webpack will build a dist directory in the root of my project, and it will include the bundle.js file, which is all of the JavaScript in my source directory bundled together and minified. And also it includes an HTML file which is built off of this template that I have in my public folder called template HTML. Alright, so if you remember that, then you'll know that when I run npm, or when I do npm run start and start up the Webpack dev server, this is what I'll have in the browser. It's very simple. If we wanted to style it, we could, right, as any other project. We could just go in, we can create, and I like to do things this way. You don't have to organize things this way yourself, but in my source folder I like to create a folder called styles, and within that I will put a CSS file that corresponds to my home page, my home.js file, and I call that home.css. And of course I'll need to import that style sheet into my home.js file, so I can do import styles, and of course the home.css file. So now, having that set up, you would think that I should be able to, for example, if I called this title, sorry, I gave it a class name of title, and then I went into my CSS style sheet, used the class selector for title, and say let the text color be what? Purple. Let's make it purple. All right. You would think that I should be able to have those styles applied to my HTML, but in fact you can see that I've already gotten an error from trying to do that. It says failed to compile, and then if I go look at the error itself, it says you may need an appropriate loader to handle this file type. And the loader that we don't have is the CSS loader. Right, and what CSS loader will do is it will actually take the CSS that we have and put it into a string for us, and then send it into our dist directory appropriately, so that we can have CSS stylings in our project. Right, so what we'll need to do now is, well, let's go ahead and look at Webpack, their home page at the documentation for loaders. All right, and we'll be using css-loader, so we can just install it using this text here. Just paste that in. All right, and using it is not hard. We just go into our webpack.config file. We go into module and rules, and we're going to add a rule for our CSS loader. And you can get that from the Webpack documentation page. In fact, we can just copy it right here. All right, and we'll make things look consistent. All right, so what we're saying is that all files that are have the CSS file extension will use the CSS loader, or the CSS loader will be used on those files. All right, and let's just keep things consistent here by putting in our parentheses. That way we can add SCSS, for example, later. All right, so now we have that set up. And if we try to run our project at this point, let's do a build first. npm run build. All right, and then do npm run start. And by the way, you see we're getting no errors at this point. Okay, we see that we're getting the page, but we're not getting the styles applied, right? Remember, we said that we wanted to have the color of the text in this heading be purple, right? We gave it a class name of title, and then in our CSS style sheet we said that let the text color in that title tag be purple. But as you see, we're not getting it. So we've only done half of what we need to do. We've taken the CSS and we've converted it to a string and made it available to be used, but we haven't actually injected it into our HTML. And we inject it into HTML, or actually it gets injected into your HTML through a style tag, and that's done by a package called css-loader. So we'll have to add that as well. Go back to the Webpack documentation page, you can see that they have also css-loader configured, so we'll need to add that as a dependency. So as usual, make sure it's a dev dependency, and that's css-loader. All right, make sure that it's in your package.json file. It's something you should probably always do. All right, and you see that it is css-loader along with the CSS loader. Okay, go into your Webpack config file, and actually before we do that, let's take a look here in the configuration documentation at webpack.js.org. It says loaders are executed from right to left or from top to bottom. All right. So in our case, if we were to add another loader here, right, rather than let this be just a simple string, let's make it an array. All right. It says that they're loaded from top to bottom, or sorry, bottom to top, right? And what we want to happen first is we want the CSS loader to do its thing, right, which will convert your CSS to a string. And then we want style loader to do its thing, which means it'll inject it through a style tag into your HTML. All right, so we need this one to happen first. And if things are executed from bottom to top, that means the style loader should be put on top, since we want to actually have it happen last. All right, so now we've got it set up, and we should be able to see our stylings. I probably didn't even need to run build at that point. It was just kind of a habit. We could just run our dev server. All right, good. So maybe you can't see it, but the text is actually purple. If you want to see a more dramatic example of the fact that our styles are working now, you can just go ahead and make the body background black. All right, and you see that it's working. We'll change the text color to make it more visible. We'll say let it be yellow. Okay, so now we have styles in our project through CSS style loader, or sorry, through CSS loader and style loader. Okay, and maybe we might want to add a header to our project. This is completely optional. If you want to just fast forward past this, you can. Let the color of the header be Rebecca Purple in honor of Gatsby. I like Gatsby. And then let the color of the font be, just let it be white to make it as visible as possible. All right, what do we have? All right, so we have our little header. Doesn't look great. You can see that we've got these black spaces around our header, and we can remedy that just by going into the excuse me, the CSS style sheet, letting the margin be 0 with the body, and it takes it away from the sides, but the top still has that. So if anytime you want to get rid of that and you just don't know what else to do, you can go ahead and do this kind of nuclear option where you use the star, and then you say that means apply it to every element and make the margin 0 and say the padding 0. I mean, there's so much you can do here. I'm just making it quick and easy so that we have a header that doesn't have those annoying spaces. All right, so we're good here. All right, and let's bring down the heading here from the header a little bit, the H1 heading from the header. So we'll use the title selector, and we'll just say here margin top and make it 30 pixels. All right, so that's good. All right, now let's try to do something else. Let's just try to add an image. All right, and we'll create an image container as a div. We'll give it a class of image container. All right, and then we'll add in the image. All right, now as I told you before, I added an assets folder to my project, or to the, not to the root, but actually to the source directory, and in that assets folder I have an image. And like I said, you can use whatever image you want. And I call this image webpack-icon, right? And it's a PNG file. So I need to import that if I want to use it. And we'll just call it Webpack logo. And we'll import it from assets. All right, and I can use that easily enough. All right, but you can see that now I'm getting another error, and it's an error that's fairly consistent with the one we had before when we couldn't get our CSS to work, or when we tried to add our CSS stylings. And here it says again, you may need an appropriate loader to handle this file type. So the loader that we're going to need in this case is file loader. Actually, let's just go look at their page. So just type in file loader. All right, look at the documentation. All right, again, you install it as a dev dependency. So we'll do that. And once it says it's installed, go to your package.json file and make sure it's there. Looks like it is. Okay, let's look at their configuration documentation. All right, and they give you an example here. It's just adding a rule to your set of rules in your module object. All right, and we can grab this. All right. Take that and add it to your Webpack configuration file right below your CSS rule, or your css-loader style loader rule. Okay, and just to keep things simple, let's not do that. All right, so we can use PNG file. We can use files with extensions PNG, JPG, or GIF. All right, and there's also some options we can use here. All right, and what we can do is we can make sure that we send these to our dist folder in a way that's easy to understand that they're there, right? We can create a path to all of these files in our dist folder, and we'll call that assets. It'll be a directory called assets that mirrors the assets directory that we have in our source folder, right? And then we can make sure that the names of the files appear as they do in our original assets folder, in our source folder, right? So we can just use these options right here. Okay, and now if we run build, right, we should see those files in our dist folder. All right, good, and we see that we have an assets directory, and in there we have our Webpack icon. Okay, so now if we run our dev server, all right, good. We see that we have our image included, and that looks terrible. So we can just go in and adjust the width. It's a square image, so that's all we need to adjust. And let's just give it a width of 200. All right, and see how that looks. Okay, good. So now we have images. And maybe let's just, so we don't have everything bunched up right against the left side of the page. I'm using an H2 in my header, so we'll say here all right, so move that over a little bit, and we'll do the same thing. All right, so we've already verified that CSS works, so we'll say here actually we'll give that a class also of title. Okay, so we moved everything over a little bit, and that's good. All right, so you can see now we have a project that has CSS where we can use CSS stylings in our project. We've adjusted Webpack to allow that to happen, as to where if we didn't add the CSS loader and the style loader, we couldn't have done that. And also now we have images using the file loader package for Webpack. All right, now say you want to deploy your application. I mean, at this stage, you obviously wouldn't want to deploy this really useless application. It's not an application as much as it is just a static web page. But if you wanted to deploy it, you could. And I'm going to look at how to deploy it to Netlify. It's not difficult at all. So what you'll need to do before you do anything, because with Netlify we'd like to use continuous deployment from our GitHub repository. First, what you should do is you should initialize a Git repository. So let's go ahead and initialize this as a Git project. And what you can do is you can write git init, right? And I've already done that. And then go into your GitHub and set up a repository. And we'll just call this Webpack with React. If that's easy to remember. And don't do anything else, all right? Just give it a title and then create the repository. Now you're going to get this screen here. If you've never seen this before, don't worry about it, but go ahead and copy that URL. Right? And then what we'll want to do is we'll want to add all of our files to our Git project. But before we do that, what we don't want to add and send to our GitHub repository are these node modules. Right? Look how many of them there are, how many different files there are in there. And also, we don't want to send our dist folder to our GitHub repository. That's meaningless, because when somebody clones our repository and then does the npm run build, they're going to rebuild that dist directory anyway. So what we'll do is, in the root of our project, we'll create a file, .gitignore. Okay, and then in that file, just add node. Whoa, that happens to me a lot. In that file, what is going on here? Sorry, I'm not quite sure what happened here. I hit the wrong button. All right, let's try this again. In this file, go ahead and exclude the node modules, and also exclude the dist folder. We don't need to see those in our GitHub repository. All right, and if you are, if you're fairly new to web development and you're looking for a job and you get a take-home test, and they say go ahead and solve this problem, write some code that does whatever it is they want you to do. It might be displaying some values from a JSON file in a table or whatever, and then they say go ahead and put this into a GitHub repository and then send us a link to the repository. Make sure that you don't have those node modules in your GitHub repository, because if you do, they're going to look at that as evidence that you don't really have a lot of experience working with Git and GitHub. All right, so make sure that you use a .gitignore folder every time if you're going to be sending your code to a GitHub repository, and then, like I said, exclude your node modules. At least exclude those. So anyway, we've got that set up. So now go ahead and add your code to your Git project, and just do git add everything. Okay, and then you can check out all of the files that are ready to be committed here. And then we can do a commit. And we'll just call this the initial commit. Okay, and we should be good to go, except for we don't have any way of telling our telling Git on the command line where to send these files, what the address of our GitHub repository is, right? So we have to add the remote URL. So what we do is we say git remote, and if you just do -v, you'll see I had this set to go to a different repository called Webpack React. But what I want to do is I want to add a different origin, right? So you can say git remote add origin, and then that URL that we copied earlier when we created our repository. Good, and that won't let me do that. So what we need to do is we need to delete the origin that we had prior, and I always forget how to do this, so all right. Okay, so we can do that. Okay, to be honest, I'm never happy with GitHub's documentation. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to understand. But what we can do here, it looks like, is just say git remote rm origin. All right, and if we check git remote, we see we have no more origin. So now we can add an origin. Git remote add origin, and then add our repository that we just created. Okay, no errors there. Now if we say git remote v, we see that that new origin has been added to our project, and now we can just go ahead and push our code to GitHub, the GitHub repository. So you can say git push origin master, as we're editing the master branch. Okay, good. So if we go back to our repository and we click code, we should see that our code has been added to it, and there it is. All right, and we see that we don't have those node modules, which is good, and we don't have a dist folder either. Okay, so now what's left to do is to go to Netlify, and if you've never used Netlify, go ahead and set up an account. I recommend just creating one through your GitHub account. All right, and when I log in, it'll log me in through my GitHub account. Okay, and I want to add a new site from Git. All right, and I use GitHub. You may use GitLab or Bitbucket. So now I look through here and I don't see any of the repositories that I want to set up for a continuous deployment. So I click configure the Netlify. Oh, what was that again? Yeah, configure the Netlify app on GitHub. And then select repository. And first I want to delete the other one that I'm not using anymore. Okay, it's not there. Good. All right, and we called this Webpack with React. All right, so that's been selected. Save it. And there it is at the bottom. So this is the one that we want to set up. Okay, so we need to add a couple of things to make sure that this deploys properly. We need to add our build command, and you know that our build command is npm run build. We've been doing that quite a bit so far. And the directory that we want to publish is, as you may have guessed, right, is dist, right? This is all of the stuff that's in dist is what we want to publish. So just type in dist. Good. And that should be good. And let's try to deploy it. And you can see that right now it's trying to build. All right, and if you look here, you can actually see the log, the build log, right? You'll see if there are any errors. Right now we're installing the node modules. We'll need those to actually run our app. This takes a little bit of time, so be patient. Good. All right. So now we're running the build command, that's Webpack. All right, everything seems to be working. All right, now it says the site is live. All right, so if we go back, we got this crazy name too. That's the one thing I don't like about Netlify is it automatically gives you these crazy names. What you can do is you can change the name just to whatever it is you want. We'll call it Webpack with React. Hopefully that's not taken. It's not. Good, so now our address, our URL will have Webpack with React in it. And if we take a look, we can see that our project has been deployed at that appropriate place on the web, right, through this URL. All right, so that's good. We've actually created a React app. We've used Webpack to configure it and make it work, because without bundling our JavaScript together and making sure that our HTML files, or our HTML file in the case of a single page application, is in the right folder, the dist folder, along with all of the assets that we need, like our images. And we made sure that we've got our CSS to work as well. So far, I think you're in a position to where you can start your own React project and you can build your own Webpack configuration file. But we're far from actually having done all of the things that you'll need to do to be able to use Webpack in the same way that it's used with the Create React app. And we may not get there anytime soon, but this will be an ongoing series, and going forward we'll look at the different things, the different features we can use, the different packages we can use with Webpack to make our application better. So anyway, as always, thank you for checking me out, and I appreciate that, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.